Hi there, a very good evening to you, our viewers. This is the business edition of PM Express with me, Philip Nanfu. And every year we mark National Farmers Day with a celebration right here in the country, depending on what the theme is. We see certain discussions and events around Farmers Day. Agriculture has been part and parcel of our Ghanaian fabric, even before independence and right after independence down to now. Agriculture is still important. Now, since I've been in school as far back as primary through junior high to senior high, the importance of agriculture has always been mentioned. And there was a mantra: agriculture is the growing of crops and the rearing of animals to provide food for man's use. That was the basic headline we were using all the time. Now, we want to delve into agricultural financing on tonight's edition of this business discussion. And I want to start off with some general education of what the agricultural sector is. If you look with regards to the categorization, agriculture is normally broken down into subsectors. So we have the crops, we have the livestock, we have the forestry and logging, and we have the fishing. Now, the share of agriculture as a percentage of GDP, also currently, as of 2018, that's the most recent data from the Ghana Statistical Service, is at 19.7%. And it came down from 21.2% in 2017. So you see that gradually the share of agriculture is reducing, and the share of services, when it comes to the three main parts of GDP, we have agriculture, we have manufacturing or industry, and then we have services. And you see that agriculture is declining gradually. Can we fix it? And the most important part of our discussion, some make the argument that we don't eat banking, we don't eat insurance, we don't eat pensions. It's agriculture that we get our food items from. So how can we push up the agricultural sector, particularly when it comes to the financing? So I have a panel of very good gentlemen. They're going to help us wade through the waters, find our way through the maze of finding a solution to agricultural financing and its challenges. So what can we learn? I'll share some figures with you as we go on in the discussion. But to help me do that, first guest, Philip Abayori, he's with the Chamber of Agri-Commerce. He's joining us to have this discussion. Then we have also Natei Nati. He is the business lead at Eat Fresh Biotech. And Farmer Anthony S.K. Morrison, a very familiar face when it comes to agricultural discussions. He's the CEO of the Chamber of Agri-Business. So these three gentlemen will be helping us wade through all these things. And we also speak on the phone lines to the Managing Director of the Agricultural Development Bank, Dr. John Kofi Mensah, to share some insights with us. ADB was set up somewhere in 1965 to provide financing for the agricultural sector. How have they been faring so far? We'll delve into all this. So this is just a brief of what we have on tonight's edition of the business edition of PM Express. We're taking a quick break. We'll be right back. Right, welcome back. This is the business edition of PM Express with me, Philip Nanfuri. I want to start off with my guest to my immediate left, Farmer Morrison, on setting the tone for our discussion. And you have practiced, or you have been farming for 10 plus years, if I'm right. Looking at the various subsectors, crops, livestock, forestry and logging, fishing, where can we say amongst these subsectors, which, if I may ask, experiences the most suffering when it comes to financing, if I can say so, to financing? Which of these has the most challenges when it comes to financing?
Well, thank you very much, and a very good evening to all your cherished viewers. And also, I want to use this opportunity to wish all farmers in Ghana Happy Farmers Day, and all the value chain players within the agribusiness industry. Yes, Philip, understanding your question, I think that it puts things into kind of a context. The industry, as we have come to understand, as a country, right from Independence Day, we've been struggling with production, and the industry has always looked at food security, and now we're looking at the zero hunger strategy. What we have done over the years is to design our policies, national development policies on production policy, or what we call the agriculture production policies, which has evolved with names, MetaSafe, and all of them. Now, the industry for me that has suffered most is aquaculture and livestock, and is an industry where most governments haven't made a lot of investment into. And I quite understand and agree with them, because we need to eat first before you think of the meat or the protein or other things. So yes, these are the industry that have suffered most. However, the forest industry has also not been given any support at all. I do remember the early this year, I was in a workshop having a discussion with the association heads as to how we can support them in various means, and a number of things came up. So, what is the country strategy that should define where financial support or agriculture, what we call the agriculture social intervention or rural agriculture intervention policies, should be taken to? So it does maneuver from one government to another government. We need to define the various zones across the country and see which zones actually give us a lot in terms of the value addition or in terms of the value chain. So you're supporting one industry and it should be able to give you a positive or an added value chain across the other value chain, but not limited to only the downstream. So if I have to educate your listeners, we're talking about downstream, midstream, and the upstream. Across the sector, any other industry value chain you look at it, there is a downstream, there is an upstream, yes, and there is a midstream. Yes. What we need to be looking at going forward is diversity. You agree with me, Philip? You sitting here, and another Philip, I mean, my very good friend. What we're talking about is the changing taste. People in kindergarten, the moment they move to primary, their changing tastes have moved. As a country, what is the strategy from food nutrition, production food nutrition? What are we doing to strategize from National Development Planning Commission? What is the whole strategy, national big strategy that influences MOFA, that influences the deregulated agriculture industry, which is the district and the regional coordinating agriculture department? What is the huge big strategy for the country? It must emanate from the farmer to the very lowest market, which sometimes we call, the off-takers, to the very restaurants, hotels, and the rest before the export.
Okay. Philip, Farmer Morrison has given us some context, and he's alluded to the fact that the livestock is one area that has suffered, and he points to a strategy that we need to drive agriculture from various sectors. What have you observed currently? What would you say is the state of the agricultural sector on the financing angle and its general rudiments, if I can say so?
Very well. Thank you very much. My observation is very simple. You cannot have a vibrant livestock sector without a vibrant crop sector. And ideally, when the crop sector is moving very well and then improving and then there's higher productivity, the waste of crops are used to feed livestock. He spoke about strategy. Yes, at the policy level, we have the policies, they're very good policies. If you come to agriculture policies, we have from the MDPC level to the ministry level, governmental, intergovernmental, there are policies. We need to look at implementation of the policies. And then also ensuring the enhancement of various sectors so that there is synergy and cooperation within the value chain. When you have a very vibrant crop sector, you are producing so much rice, you are producing so much maize, you have a very huge biomass, and that is the waste, which then could be translated to feed livestock. And when you feed that livestock, you now have another biomass, which we call will be an organic manure, which will go back to the same farms to reduce the cost of using of conventional fertilizer. It also reduces the cost of production because you are having within the same area, using the same ecosystem, I mean, to help the ecosystem to be able to thrive. So we are talking about efficient agricultural management and an efficient value chain. This is not happening at all within our agricultural sector in Ghana. We burn all the biomass that we have from crops to ashes. So that is one deficiency. Now, when you move to the aquaculture sector, we have a thriving aquaculture sector that we are growing. It's also very limited to one particular species. You talk about, if you go to aquaculture, the tilapia is being promoted very well. Mudfish, for instance, is also a very thriving and very commercial viable fish. And having a very large market even within the sub-region and also in the United States. But that is not being widely promoted. So it is something that needs to be looked at, because you need to be able to enhance your strength and then also be able to ensure that you are able to, have all the value chain working. Now, when you move beyond this, you need to produce fish feed. Fish feed comes from crops. So we have a huge post-harvest management challenge. We need to be looking at being able to have a good post-management system which allows us to be able to have good drying systems to dry the crops. We need to be able to have, cleaning systems, because all that waste culminates to another feed for another, for some other livestock or aquaculture. We need to be able to have grading systems. Once you have your maize, you have the grade A, B, C. So grade A may be for human consumption, grade B, but C, E, D may be for animal consumption. All these systems are not in place.
Okay.
So that is another deficiency. Now, when you go widely on agricultural financing, you realize that we need to have short for such gestational crops. Like if I'm doing vegetables, I know within 3 months, 70 days or 90 days, I can harvest, and promptly I can continuously sell because it's for daily use.
Okay.
If I'm doing maize, I may have 90 to 120 days, but after harvesting, I need to dry this maize very well. I need to be able to package it. I need to remove it from the husks. The process may take me another 3 months, adding to so I have about almost, let's say, more than about almost 6 months or 8 months to be able to have that maize ready to go into the market. So if I'm going to take financing and I have short-term financing, I may not be able to meet
exactly
the duration of repayment. Now, if I'm doing horticultural crops, I'm doing mango and I'm doing pineapple, especially mango, I need 3 years before the returns will come. If I'm doing livestock, I need the same 3 years. If I'm doing other tree crops, some may even take me up to 8 years. So in this case, if I'm giving short-time financing, you will have difficulties. So we need to have short, medium to long-term credit. Why do you need long-term credit? If I want to move from primary production to add value addition, I need to have equipment to be able to process. In that case, you don't expect me to use the money that the duration of credit that I'm using for production to create the process, to acquire the processing facility. That may also need long-term financing.
Okay.
These are the gaps that need to be filled, and we do not really have those vibrant financial. If you look at the ratio of financing generally in the country, you realize that agriculture is receiving less financing. Now, sometimes the banks or those that are into agricultural financing will say that it is a high-risk area. My question is that every sector in the economy is, is high risk. You may go to drill oil and you won't find the oil. You are prospecting gold, you may not find the values that you have, or an accident can happen and you can lose even the whole total risk. The same as agriculture, but agriculture is even not so risky, because if you are doing crops and you have irrigation, you can mitigate the risk, because if rain doesn't come, you can use irrigation. Okay. Now, we are happy that we have Ghana agricultural insurance. Now we even have crop insurance. So if you are financing somebody who is into crops, he can obtain insurance. When there are losses, you can get back the losses. Okay. So I think that the issue is to have a concerted effort to be able to look at agriculture as a viable alternative to economic empowerment and profitability. You can come in not to produce, but to look at post-harvest, to create warehouses, to put up a mill, to put up a facility, to be able to process these primary products that are produced by farmers, pack them, promote them, and market them. It is another way of being able to enhance agriculture.
We will come back to dwell more on the bank financing. I want to speak to Mr. Nati. He's somewhere with us in our building. Mr. Nati, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, very good. So you are running, or you are leading, I would say, a firm that's into fruits and veggies. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay.
Specifically in the post-harvest area.
Okay. So how have you raised the odds when it came to particularly getting off the ground, and more importantly, your financing? How did you overcome these challenges to get your business up and running? And I think that's Eat Fresh Biotech, right?
Fresh Biotech.
Okay. So share with us how you got up and running.
Out of the woods yet in terms of raising financing. For us, we are a startup. We've not been around for long, and so coming out with such an idea to handle post-harvest issues and to reduce post-harvest losses within the fruits and vegetable space. It's a lot of work that needs to be done. Like the earlier panelists have mentioned, most of the government policies have been skewed towards production. And you realize that along the value chain, there is that disconnect, or there isn't that synergy to link one point of the value chain to another, so that you would have a smooth or seamless running of the system. So for us, it's been quite challenging. My team and I have virtually struggled to bring the business up to this point. We've been in incubation hubs. We've come up with our idea, pitched it to a number of investors, and we have found out that that is the trend most startups are looking to go into, because the traditional ways of raising monies haven't been that favorable to a lot of young companies like ours.
Mr. Nati,
yes.
In your journey, did you ever think of approaching a traditional financial institution, e.g. or i.e. a bank, to take credit and try and use this? Did you, perhaps, apart from your investors, which you mentioned in your incubation hubs, decide that, okay, you know what, I'm going to put in my own money, my friends and I, or my colleagues and I are going to put in our own money? Did you try and approach a financial institution, or did you ever think of using your own funds even before the investors came in to support you?
When we assessed our business and our business needs, we realized going into the traditional way of getting funding or financing through the banks wasn't going to help us, because of the high lending rates we have in the country. And as the previous panelists also mentioned, the issue about risk, not even in our space, but the whole picture that is painted about agriculture being that risky. But if you have to break it down into the various sectors and the various roles each business entity plays within the value chain, then that element of risk can be looked at critically and assessed. But for us, the lending rates in the system wasn't that favorable for us, and it wasn't an option to us at this point in time.
Mr. Nati, I must ask you this. I am reliably informed that you used to be a banker, and now here you are in agriculture. I'm sure you spent quite a good number of days in the bank, and you must have some insight as to why the bankers perceive the agricultural sector, as Mr. Philip was saying earlier on. They perceive them as risky. In your time there, what insights can you share with us as to what the banking system or the bankers felt was risky in this agricultural sector, and why it was a challenge or is seen as a challenge? So the bankers say, you know what, these people are too risky, we'll not lend to them. What were some of the things you learned and can share with us?
I think that perception was as a result of lack of information and understanding of the entire system. And so you have a typical bank which does the typical trade and investment banking, letters of credit, and then it comes into this space where there isn't that much data. You have most of our farmers being peasant farmers, a few commercial farmers, understanding the rudiments of keeping records or even trying to have a track of what they have put into the ground and what comes out. Because if you look at the demographics, a lot of farmers were considered old, and the younger folks that have gone to school really didn't see farming as a good business option to choose. And so that was some perception that informed some of these decisions or criteria being labeled to farming as a risky venture. However, with the different trends that we are seeing now, I think financial institutions and funding organizations are opening their eyes to their reality, because now farmers are forming groups. Organizations and NGOs are bringing farmers together, training them. Incubation hubs are coming up, training young people in areas that they would also come up with what the funders or the investors or the financial institutions would want to see. And so at this point in time, it is up to the financial institutions to look beyond that mantra of agriculture is risky. Every area of the economy, every sector, like one panelist said, has some level of risk. So why do banks lend to contractors? Why do banks lend to the mining companies? Why do they lend to oil companies? Each individual industry has their own peculiar risk. And if you are coming into agriculture, understanding the levels of risk, what mitigative factors can be employed would also help them draw up special products or even help those on the ground to come up with what needs to be done in order to raise the funding they need.
Mr. Nati, let me shoot you this last question before I bring my other guest in. And this is data I took from Bank of Ghana's September 2019 banking sector report. And the amount of credit that went to the agriculture, forest, and fishing sector, I think Bank of Ghana puts all this as one, was 4.4% of the total credit. When you look at the total credit as at that time, the report was compiled, it was 38 billion Ghana cedis. So if you do some quick math, you realize that we're talking about some 1.7 billion Ghana cedis being channeled to the agriculture, forestry, and fishing sector. Last year, around the same time, it was 3.9% of the total gross loans in the system, which should strike about 1.4 billion. You are somebody that has worked with numbers for some time. In your estimation, you have told us that yes, banks need to change or reorient and then see agriculture as less risky and start putting money there. But from these numbers I've mentioned, 1.7 billion Ghana cedis out of 38 gross loans pumped out into the banking, into the financial system, I can say so. What do you make of this number?
I think it can be improved. It can go up. A lot of businesses are coming up within the value chain, and that is what we should be looking at. if we are looking at agriculture driving our economy, even though oil has come in, it will be good for us to start putting in the right investments, start helping the companies that are in this agribusiness space or agriculture space. If you look at the policies that have come in within the last year or two, planting for food and jobs, PED, and for livestock and all that, if the necessary investments are made, I'm sure at the end of the day, even if we look at the statistics at the end of 2019, when the year runs out and we look at the figures that have come in as a result of investments that have gone into, for instance, one district, one factory where processing is happening and the likes, you realize that more needs to go in. And so saying that just about 1 billion cedis went into the sector and you have lumped up a number of subsectors, that should tell you that it's woefully inadequate. How much would it cost even to set up a factory to process? How much would it cost to set up a packaging factory for our gari, for our meat, and all that is going to be produced from all these factories? If you look at those, if you break it down in that way, then you realize that we need to do more.
Mr. Nate, I would come back to you. Let me jump straight to Farmer Morrison. 1.7 billion out of 38 billion roughly. What do you make of it? And let me just chip this in before you give your response. In this same category of agric, forest and fishing loans that were given out, the proportion of non-performing loans within the agric, forest and fishing, according to the same Bank of Ghana data, was 32.7%. A bit on the high side. And this is just for commercial banks. I didn't even decide to take data on rural banks and stuff like that. What do you make of this?
Well, let me say that the reason why we are having all these inaccuracies in terms of financing is as a result of the fact that we have not been able to actually put a lot of infrastructures in place or strategies in place. What has developed the developed industry or Europe and America and Asia that we all want to copy from is the fact that they have developed everything based on data. In Ghana or in Africa, we do not have data. And I speak out of a lot of sadness because I've studied, I'm a recipient of the Indian Food and Agriculture Global Agriculture Leadership Awards, and I was there to study the trend for some time. And I realized that those who are actually leading the agribusiness space in India were 7 years ago leading figures in the tech industry.
Okay.
If you go to Chicago, if you go to Atlanta, it's the same trend. Ask yourself, who are those coming into the industry in Ghana and in Africa? What we should be looking at, we've spoken about the Credit Reference Bureau. Ask them, what's the percentage of the agribusiness or the agriculture value chain players within their data? I can tell you it's not even 1%. You see, if we are talking about agri-financing, we should be serious as a country. Data is very critical. We have the Open Data Initiative for Agriculture. How has the country tapped into that? If we are to develop and we are to make sure that we are feeding and we have a value-aligned industry, we need to make sure that right down from production, land preparation, inputs, transportation of raw materials, storage, processing, transportation of finished product to the consumer is all finance. You can't finance production
and leave something else
and expect that the rest of the value chain should cater for itself. No, it doesn't work like that. I mean, you agree with me. If your parent had given birth to you and allow you to be on the street, you wouldn't be where you are today.
At all.
Probably if you would, it's 2 out of 100%. You understand? So our leaders ought to understand that when we talk about agribusiness or agriculture value financing, it needs to encompass the whole material, all the interface within the value chain. You can't finance production just because you want to make sure that your citizens can buy gari or banku or kenke or rice at 1 city, 2 cities, 3 cities, and you have an MP in parliament talking about the size of rice or the size of kenke or the size of banku has reduced. No, it doesn't work like that. You need to work it out. I'll tell you, we were in Brazil 2007, okay? And Brazil has standardized gari. They have 5 grades, okay? The last grade of gari in Brazil is more expensive than 50 kg of rice in Ghana. That should tell you the investment these people have put into that sector. So what Bank of Ghana is saying, yes, I will agree with them, but at the same time, I will also advise them to actually talk to the right people in the industry, pick the right information, put the right infrastructures together. See, the only way we can develop as a country, 4 years ago, when the fall army worms came on board, I was in this studio with Joseph Opoku Gakpo, and we're talking about all these challenges. United States Department for Agriculture said they have put $150 million into the northern regions in supporting production. Now, if we're having enough database, we would know that GIZ, USAID, all the development partners and DFIs are actually putting this quantum. There is no dashboard as we speak as a country to say that we are feeding in what you, Philip, you are doing from your FBO or your smaller hood, or what he, Philip, is doing from his commercial farm. There is no dashboard as a country. So even now, as we speak, all the other data that we are throwing about, they are projections. The data we pick, and the only data that is authenticated is from United States Department for Agriculture. That comes in maybe every 3 months or every 6 months based on information coming from media or coming from one sector, and they quickly get in there to do proper research.
Okay.
So what we should be looking at as a country is to build a proper agribusiness credit bureau aside what is running with the financial credit bureau. Because what goes in, and he will agree with me, if I come in as an insurer or a financier, I take your land separate, value it. Is your land where you are operating your commercial farm or whatever, is it in your name? Is it in your company's name? How many years do you have it? We take that into consideration. Then we come to the input, either crops or livestock, what is there? We take the quantity into consideration. Then we also look at the health bill of the crops or the livestock into consideration. Yeah, you can say you have 100,000 birds. What is the health bill of these 100,000 birds? Then we look at your market. Then we look at your structures. So in terms of setting up a credit bureau in the agribusiness industry, it's a different ballgame. It's not like what pertains in the other industries of having credit bureaus.
I want you to hold on to your horses for me. I'll take a quick commercial break. This is the business edition of PM Express. We'll be right back. You're still live on the JoyNews channel, and this is the business edition of PM Express with me, Philip Nanfuri. And this is part of our discussion and our contributions towards tomorrow's National Farmers' Day. And as a business desk in a media house, we decide to empanel a very astute group of gentlemen to share insights and knowledge on just financing. The agricultural sector is huge. If we were to discuss it, I'm sure most of you sleep and leave us here. Farmer Morrison was making a very fine point before we went on the break. I'll let him wrap up, and then I'll proceed to Mr. Philip to also give his points on the financing bits with regards to the commercial bank data. So, Farmer Morrison.
Yes, thank you very much, Philip. I think that 3 things, what we need to be doing. From the banking sector, they need to follow up with what we call the portfolio management. I stated here, I think earlier in the afternoon, about the fact that our banking sector gives credit to the oil and gas, telecommunication, construction, and they stay in there and manage the portfolio with regards to qualitative, quantitative, and what has been stated in the project management scheme of affairs. They don't do that in agriculture. They're not ready to follow us to the forest and stay with us in the forest and make sure that when Mr. Phillips says, I'm going to do permaculture and I'm not going to do inorganic production, Mr. Phillips follows through on his farm. No, they are not interested. All they're interested is at the end of the 30 days, the interest started falling. But so what we need to do, the banking sector needs to orient themselves, okay, and make sure that they carry on what we call the portfolio management in the agriculture sector. Then, secondly, there is an innovative financing scheme, which is called, the government uses it, and we need to make sure that it comes into the agriculture enclave, which is called the Special Purpose Vehicle, the SPV. Why do we need SPV? SPV has been used in America, has been used in Brazil, in an innovative way. And we're talking about innovative financing. This is where you have the technology developer, the financier, the farmer, and the credit person. And that notwithstanding, to state the last two.
Yeah.
The only way we can move on with agribusiness financing or agriculture financing is to make sure that we put together a credit agency that removes the myth, that put together you, the farmer, the smallholder farmer, the processor, the logistic person, the input supplier, and everybody into a credit finance scheme to make sure that when you go for credit, whatever you go for is in a database. If the farmer goes for input as a credit, it's in a database. It is the only way that we can move on. Then don't move too fast. You see, if you want to manage these things, time, 1 hour doesn't talk about agriculture.
True, but
because when you sit down to eat,
we have the constraints.
No, when you sit down to eat, you eat from vegetables to fruits to meat to all that. It takes you 2 hours. So at the end of the day, we need to find innovative ways to solving our innovative agriculture issues.
Mr. Aboyori, on the financing bit, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, we need to, you see, agribusiness is business. And those that are into financing, they are into business. And what they do is that they look at risk, they also look at profits. I will encourage the banks and those that are into financing that agriculture is very lucrative and is worth financing. The risks are now very limited, but it needs a lot of development and expertise to be able to put things in order. You don't expect the smallholder farmer to have all the skills to be able to put up a project proposal. But like he talked about portfolio management, you can use such a scheme to be able to put up things for a small group of farmers to be able to gain credit. Now, with a vibrant value chain, you can have certain aggregators who can stand in to ensure that repayments are made, because we now have a demand-driven agricultural sector. We have a consumer who dictates the pattern of production. So it's very easy to make recovery. The farmer knows what he's producing, the market is already available. There is an aggregator who is ready to pick up this produce. This interface could help even the most weakest farmer to obtain credit and be able to pay. We need to also look at the lending rates. And I think in the budget something has come up to be able to, to facilitate credit. And that scheme will be able to allow medium to long-term borrowing. And I think that is what government can do. The rest of it is private business, and we need to look at it. People can afford sometimes, everybody in this country want to have a secondary income to be able to, make a living. But we as players, as we are sitting here, we are finding ways to be able to encourage people who want to have secondary income and they have money and they want to invest in the sector. How do they put it as a pool? What is a protection comfort zone for them so that they don't lose their money? Because you realize that by doing that, people carry their monies and they put them somewhere. At the end of the day, it becomes an issue. But can currently we have, so much rice in the northern, upper east region. And you know definitely that it is very profitable when you have an 83 kilogram of rice. When you mill it, you have 66 kilos. Immediately, the cost of the 86 kilos today is not more than 100 and, let's say 80, almost 120 cedis. The moment you mill that rice, 25 kilos costs not less than about 90, almost 90 cedis, 95 cedis. The other 25 kilos, so 50 kilos, you are going to get 200 cedis. How much did it cost you to buy? 120 cedis. Immediately you mill, this is the profit. You still have 16 kilos. If you add that, that means that you invest in almost 120 cedis, you are making 300 cedis. Is it not lucrative? But how do we get you sitting here to put in your money to be able to let us have paddy, have a good meal, have a very good marketing strategy where we can package this rice, name it Philip Nafori, and put it in the market there, push it for Ghanaians to know. If the rice that we are producing currently is the same rice that is being imported. Now, we in this country, we are very lucky to have land, we have water resource, we have a competitive and comparative advantage to grow various crops. And, government will always come in. This is a private sector activity, but government coming to take the lead to show the way. In the Planting for Food program that came, government anticipated they want to have 625 or 630,000 tons. Today, as we said, almost 52 or 56% of the rice harvested, we are hitting about 1.3 million tons. Private people follow government, because when government take the lead, everybody go. People did 300 acres, 400 acres, 500 acres. Now we have so much rice. It's an indication that production we can do. Now we have a challenge of post-harvest management and marketing. So this is where we now need banks to come in. And we need to get government to be able to get these banks to know that whenever the economy is moving in a direction, they should move in that direction. They move in that direction because we're talking about nation building. If somebody goes to import rice into the country, he pays duty, there are overhead costs and etc., shipment costs. If we are able to consolidate, to support people with financing to pick up this rice, I just gave you analysis. You use 125 cedis to get 300 Ghana cedis, immediately you mill a bag of rice. Is it not profitable? Where is the risk? Is the risk marketing? We are importing 1.4 million tons of rice into the country. Is there no market? But the issue is money, financing, and technology. Can we get development banks who are ready to put in money for us to be able to, get technology? Can we get those development banks or the development financing to allow me or you?
Philip, he's raising a very important point, but I want to come in there. You see, development banks.
Do that for me quickly.
No, development banks. Development banks give money to commercial banks. It's the commercial banks that rent, that gives us the credit, okay? So if the commercial banks are giving out credit, what is the mandate on the commercial banks to make sure that they're giving credit to the right people? What is the infrastructure or the structure in place to make sure? And one thing they need to look at for, even the farmers or the agribusiness value chain players requires to keep data of their financial flows, okay? That is very important. But the financial institutions, the ADB, all the other institutions that give credit, should be able to set aside some part of their money that goes directly into production and the value chain financing. You see, we can keep on taking money from development banks, but development banks themselves do not give money directly to institutions or companies or SBOs. They give money to commercial banks. At what rate do they give their money?
That's why government is going to put up the National Development Bank.
No,
isn't that part of the solution?
We have GESL.
And then GESL too.
No, we have GESL. We're coming in with the agriculture insurance scheme, which is also all to mitigate the credit financing industry. However, that is not enough. Bank of Ghana itself needs to reduce their interest rate.
We'll come to that. Mr. Nate, I want to get your thoughts here, particularly on the way forward as we wrap up on the conversation. I will start my wrap up with you. You've heard all the submissions, particularly from Farmer Morrison on the private sector. What do you expect to see? And also from the government side, what do you want to boost businesses like yours so that 5, 10 years, 15 years down the line, your business can stand on its own?
Okay, so on the government side, I expect that government would also shift some focus on the post-harvest value chain, where marketing, packaging, and all that storage and all that is taken into consideration. Currently, I don't see clearly where the policy lie, especially when it comes to these areas that I've mentioned. And when it comes to financing, individuals and also corporate organizations can also venture into these spaces. When I was part of the incubation with Cosmos Innovation Center, we realized that a lot of people came up with so many ideas, so many innovations that needed some form of funding. But this incubation hub is limited with its funding. And so for those individuals and businesses that have funds to invest in this area and they don't know exactly where to put their monies, these are other areas that they could be looking at. Fine, donor agencies come in, you have other funding coming from other sources, there's the venture capitalists, private equity, but these are not enough, especially if you have to compare what you have to pay out in terms of your repayment and to also sustain the business and let the business thrive over a longer period. So we should be looking at opportunities and coming up with policies that will enable private sector players also to come in and also boost individual businesses that are venturing into areas that hitherto we didn't have any performance in those areas.
Mr. Nate, thank you very much. That was Nate. He's business lead at Eat Fresh Biotech. I'll come to Mr. Bayori for 2 minutes and then give Farmer Morrison also 2 minutes. Mr. Bayori, wrapping up.
Agriculture is a private-oriented activity. You know, definitely it is the one that employs the large number of their population. And it is agriculture that can feed industry. It is of interest for us to, as citizens, to look at the way we can also invest our bits into it. It is profitable. And though government will take the lead, I can assure you that you cannot expect government to have all the funds to be able to solve the challenges in the agricultural sector. So through innovation, as Morrison has said, we need to be able to have a common ground and then look at the policy framework which already exists. The only challenge we have is the resources available. If I want to go into a bank to borrow $3 million to go down and mop up the rice that is in the Upper East region, it may take me so long to be able to do that. We need to be able to have a platform that allows us to be able to borrow. I mean, once you're qualified, you should be able to get this money. We need to be able to do that in line of government policy. Today we have a glut of maize. We have so much that is happening. If that is good for trade, it is good for commerce. But if there are no resources and no easy way for us to be able to get money to be able to go and mop up this produce, it will be an effort that is meaningless, and that will not be good for us. So I think that we all need, as a country, to be conscientized so that at least we know that this is an opportunity. We never knew that we can go back to be able to produce so much. That means that we still have the strength. What do we do is now for us to be able to derive the benefit of our production and ensure that it will help us to reduce the import bill and also help us to be able to create genuine employment, feed industry with the raw material that we have, make agricultural, make food competitive to the Ghanaian consumer.
Okay.
I think that is what we need.
Mr. Abayori, thank you very much. And finally to our
2 minutes is not enough.
2 minutes is enough for you. It's not enough for you.
It's not enough. You see, as a country, we are hosting the AFTA. And on Wednesday, I'll be doing a presentation on that with regards to the weaknesses and challenges of the AFTA to Ghana. If you are talking about agri-financing, this is the time as a country we need to take agri-financing very serious. If you've not been serious with agri-financing, this is the time. Nigeria have the financial powers that we do. Ivory Coast have more than we do. Senegal have more than we do. They take credit at single digit. We take credit at 27%. You understand? Moving forward, I chair the Ghana Agriculture Skills Council. And this is another area which is of immense importance. We can continue to finance, but if you do not finance skills, The last budget, before this one was read, we spent only $400,000 cedis on FBO capacity building. If you are to increase production from maize, 1 hectare, 1.7 tons per hectare, to probably 7 tons per hectare, we need to invest a lot into skills, technical skills that could move our rice production of the meager tons we are doing per hectare to what the world is doing, or probably even half of the other developing countries. So we need, you see, the reason why we are talking about rice is that our local farmers.
We have 30 seconds left.
Look, give me 2 more minutes. Look, our local partners, our local farmers, okay, do not have the requisite technical skills compared to Thailand, compared to Pakistan, compared to India. We do not have it. We need to invest. We need to make available enough money to train our farmers, give them the current technical skills. They need to make sure that their hectare or acre or acreage that they are using, they can use it to produce as far as Europe or America is giving them. That notwithstanding, market-oriented policies are very critical. Let's move on from production policy and look at the market. The rice we are eating today that we import were produced 5 years ago and were stored. Now they have added storage margins, they've added all the other margins, handling margin, food margin, and we are buying and paying for it in another country, and we are creating jobs. So at the end of the day, what we need to be looking at, moving forward as a country, fintech is what is going to define the industry. Fintech is what is the game changer.
Gentlemen.
And at the end of the day, we'll be investing single digits, and Bank of Ghana should mark it. It is very important. They should take it from me. I'm giving you, I'm telling you, from the intelligence I picked from the industry. So Philip, we need to come back to this. I mean,
we'll come back to it.
Yes.
This has been a business edition of PM Express with me, Philip Nanfu. Last gentleman, Farmer Morrison, CEO of Agri Chamber, and Philip Abayori, he's with the Agri Commerce Chamber, and Natenete, business lead, Eat Fresh Biotech. I wish you a good Farmers Day tomorrow. Enjoy your holiday, and it's goodbye from us here at the JoyNews team.